G'day and welcome to the Spearo podcast, the world's #1 spearfishing dedicated podcast. I'm your host Turbo, if you don't already know, and I hope you've been getting out and getting some fish in the last fortnight. Had some great viz and shot a PB. Let's just hope. Now, it's been an absolutely hectic time for us. We're running our Kickstarter campaign, but I'll get to that a little bit later. More on today's episode. And it is awesome. We speak with John Pengelly. Now, for those of you who don't know John already, chances are if you're on any of the social platforms, you would have seen John either holding up a massive dogtooth tuna. I believe that was hanging from a tree, and also a massive wahoo. Now, it turns out those two fish were both world records that he shot in New Caledonia on a spearfishing trip, and he shot them within a day or 2 days of each other, I believe. So, awesome story. Imagine that, heading off to New Cal on a spearfishing trip to shoot some pelagics and you bag 2 world records. Awesome. Absolutely unbelievable. And we talk all about that trip. We talk all about hunting those fish. And we also talk a little bit about hunting the reef and what John does when he looks for signs and how he replicates, good hunting. Hang on, let me word that a little bit better for you. How he predicts conditions, and he looks for different conditions so that he can work out if the reef's going to produce for him or not. He's a bit of a thinker, old John. So hopefully you can learn something off John. And a big thank you to his partner for dobbing him in and getting him on the show. We've been after him for a little while, and we finally got him thanks to her. So that's awesome. All right, now, the Adreno sale's coming up March 17 to April 15. That's the Adreno Easter sale. It's going to be absolutely massive. This year is even better because if you can't get to a store, you can use the Spearo code at checkout and save yourself a further $20 off every purchase over $200. So, and that's on top of the already discounted prices. So that's just awesome. So big thank you to the guys at Adreno for making that possible for our listeners. We love you guys. The Kickstarter campaign, yes, that's kicking off for 99 tips to get better at spearfishing. All right, now you're gonna see a lot of this on our Facebook and our Instagram, so you're not going to miss it. But if you'd like to support 99 tips to get better at spearfishing, the campaign's all about raising enough money so that we can send these books out to you, printed, full colour, beautifully with a hard cover. And that's the result of 3 years interviewing the world's best Spearos. So you've probably heard a lot of these Spearos. We've boiled it all down into 99 tips to get better at spearfishing. And the Kickstarter campaign kicks off on the 10th. Awesome. All right, well, that's enough from me. Let's get into today's episode with Shrek, John Pengelly, and myself.
If you like listening to the Spearo podcast, you're probably going to enjoy listening to an audiobook. And I've got an offer for you today from today's show sponsor, Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/Spearo and get your hands on our new audiobook, 99 Tips to Get Better at Spearfishing, free. Just go to the URL audibletrial.com/Spearo and get your hands on our audiobook for free. Listen to even more of Turbo and myself.
G'day Spearo listeners. Today you are in for an absolute treat. We are talking to dual world record holder John Pengelly, all the way from sunny Gladstone in central Queensland. Now, John, amongst being a dual world record holder for 2 of the world's most prestigious fish, is also a shark attack victim survivor. He survived a shark attack with a 3-metre bull shark while spearfishing on Lamont Reef as a 19-year-old. Now, that wasn't enough to stop John. He has continued in the sport. And in 2014, John broke the Wahoo world record with a 137-pound or 62.6 kilogram specimen in the Austral Islands of French Polynesia. The previous world record of Bruce Galdino was absolutely smashed. Now, this record was only 125 pounds, so John absolutely eclipsed that record. Now, that wasn't enough for John. The following day, he went out and shot himself the world record Dogtooth Tuna at 109 kilos or 240 pounds, beating the previous record of Cameron Kirkconnell at 91 kilos. Now, that is a pretty big wrap. Welcome to the show, John Pengelly.
Yeah, thanks for having us, guys. It's good to be here.
Did you love that research?
I can't believe...
Did you love that?
That was beautiful, eh?
I can't believe you only shot 2 world records.
Yeah.
Just 2.
Only 2.
Turbo, how many records have you got, buddy?
What in, mate?
Your other sport, maybe.
No, I've got that many world records. Pick a sport. All right, we don't have time. Moving on. This is about John, not me. Anyway, John, why don't you tell us, we'll get to your records, we'll get to the shark bite, we'll get to all the amazing catches. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Where did you start your spearfishing?
Spearfishing started, I think, about 11 years ago now.
Yeah.
It was, here in Gladstone. I was always intrigued by the ocean a fair bit, and took a couple of times out with my dad and some of his mates, mainly just swimming along, snorkeling beside them. But it was a few years in the making before I actually got the chance to go out and start diving properly in a team, which was established through meeting a good mate and best mate of mine now, Dave Jensen, at a few parties, and we eventually got in contact with each other and had a day out in the boat, and that was the beginning of the end, really.
So, was Dave a Spearo, or did you both sort of get into it together?
He was already a Spearo, yeah. His old man has speared most of his life, and Dave was boaty for pretty much since he can walk, I think, and entered into the water with a spear gun at the age of 8.
Yeah, right. And so, what was your first sort of fish species you were chasing up there in Gladstone? I've got a fair idea, but why don't you tell our listeners what you do on the Southern Great Barrier Reef when you're starting?
Yeah, so when you first start out, my very first fish I ever shot was a greasy cod.
Oh, nice.
It was epic.
Yum.
Yeah, yum, exactly.
But it's more starting out in the target species fish. I think the coral trout's probably the one that everyone's chasing, and that one actually took me a little bit to get the monkey off my back. I had a few issues with just being able to actually spot them from the surface, and then after spotting them, it come down to trying to approach them, read their body language, and then after I managed to be able to finally spot them and get closer to them, I had to improve my shot and actually hit them.
Yeah, right. So what were you actually shooting? If you couldn't shoot trout, which are a very prestigious, hard to shoot fish, what were you actually shooting? What was, besides cod, was there anything dumber than trout on the reef when you're starting out?
I suppose the golden trevally, I'd say, probably would have been the one that the first decent fish that I'd actually got to shoot while the other guys are taking mangrove jack and trout, and that I'd maybe get a bludger trevally or a golden trevally or something like that in a big school swimming around.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And that's they're exciting. They're exciting fish to see, I think, when you're starting out, when you first start landing them. I remember the excitement of shooting my first trevally. I actually still like shooting the odd trevally. Yeah,
for sure. The goldens eat pretty well. Like my the first day I actually ever got out and actually got properly hooked on spearfishing was a day where I shot my first golden. And funny enough, the exact mark that I dove is probably the start of a fair few Spearos. I believe I think Ant Judge that was on the show. It was this spot was the introduction to some of his reef diving, and probably went very similar. They're chasing Spanish mackerel and ended up with schools of golden trevally vortexing you and 20-meter viz, and yeah, that was pretty much my first actual day on the reef and what had me hooked from the start.
I remember when I went from like Brisbane waters up to the off 1770 there in some of those islands, and like learning to spot trout from the surface is kind of the hardest thing because the water's often crystal clear, but they've got an odd movement to their body. Is that kind of how you learn to spot them?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's just getting there, knowing the area that they usually they frequently sit, and two, being able to spot their movements and silhouettes, which was something that took me a while to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. Everyone has that boogie fish. For me, it was like Spanish mackerel. I shot about, 7 or 8 before I finally landed one. So how long did it take you to get a coral trout?
It probably took me half a year, about 6 months, I think. I wasn't diving every weekend when I first started out, so there was a fair bit of breaks in between. But yeah, I definitely do remember. It mightn't have been 6 months, but it was definitely 6 months or longer before I could actually go out with the guys and bring back a coral trout most times, where everyone else was always smacking at least a couple.
Yeah. And what about like 11 years on? What's the fish that's challenging you the most at the moment?
I suppose that one comes down to where I'm living. I've been moving around a fair bit lately. If it was going off Gladstone here tomorrow, I'd say it would have to be just any type of Legena species, really. I've shot them, and I don't exactly find them too hard to shoot now, but just finding them and researching the area and the locations where they do sit, and getting a decent specimen is probably the challenge and the passion that we all thrive for up here now.
So that's your emperor species, is it? Like your red-throat emperor and things like that?
Yeah, it's more for us anyway, the Legenesis that we're chasing are like your red emperor, your mangrove jack, your largemouth nanagai, finger mark, all those green jobfish, all those species, yeah.
Yeah, right. Very good. Shrek smashes those with his bottom time. He's pretty impressive. Right, let's move on to memorable fish. I mean, we've got a couple. I think we should probably. I think everyone out there would love to hear the story about your trip over to French Polynesia and those two records, mate. How did that all come about?
Yeah, it was a bit of a funny story actually. I actually was just off the back of like 1 week post taking a chartered trip of guys to Norfolk Island actually, and it was a bit of a flop of the trip, that one, with really poor conditions, and the same time of year as like some of the guys there this year have been shooting good wahoo and etc. But yeah, it was just we all get those trips where there was nothing. No, anyway, I ended up coming back to New Zealand, and I was working in Ocean Hunter at the time, and I actually got the invite to head over to French Polynesia and dive with G. From my boss at the time, actually. He was originally invited, but he couldn't make it at the time, and I jumped at the chance. So that was pretty much 1 week notice, and in that 1 week I started rigging all my gear and organising flights. Called up a mate in New Zealand, older bloke that I've dived with a few times, and we got the trip happening. So from there we flew over and met up with G in Tahiti itself, and spent a night there catching up. Jumped on a plane the next day, and the plane ride itself was a bit daunting at the start. We actually had 2 failed plane flights where I had engine problems and had to turn around and come back.
Excellent.
So yeah, we didn't actually know if we were going to make it there. It was pretty nerve-wracking at the start. But we ended up making it that night. We got in pretty late and couldn't actually see the ocean very well, but it looked pretty smooth. And talking to the locals when we rocked up, we were pretty ecstatic to find out all the water conditions were great. There'd been heaps of wahoo around and glass conditions, which was actually a pretty rare thing for the time of year when the wahoo run. They are usually pretty volatile weather patterns, and they do get some pretty rough seas. So that was the thing that went right from us from the start, was just being lucky enough to get good weather. Apparently, the days before there was 5 metre seas breaking into the lagoon.
Oh wow! And that's September, is it?
Yeah, that's correct. Early September I was there, it's actually late in the wahoo season in September. They're usually, I think I must have got the tail end of it. They could have disappeared for any of the days I was there. They were pretty much expecting them to disappear and leave again.
Yeah, right. Wow. So you threw together this trip in sort of under a week. You're late in the season for wahoo, but you sort of jagged perfect conditions. So what are we talking? The following day you went out, you went chasing these fish. What sort of viz and what sort of greeted you once you got out there? Was it early morning?
Yeah, so we started about 6 o'clock. We started jumping in the boats and heading out. We don't really dive. It's something that I've found through all the tropic islands and the Pacific really is we don't really spend any time in the water in the middle of the days. Most of the fish go deep, so it's usually a morning session, break for lunch and have a siesta, and then head back out in the afternoons.
Yeah.
So you start at 6 and we headed out, and the viz was amazing. We had The whole time we were there, the viz would have been around 70 metres.
70 metres, not 70 feet, metres.
70 metres, yeah. You could see the bottom crystal clear in 50.
Jeez,
Awesome.
That's incredible.
So were you guys drifting when you come on your Wahoo, or did you have flashes in the water? What was what was the scenario?
Yeah, so we used flashes the whole time. The shark population in these places were a bit too healthy to really worry about burley. We pretty much rocked up on the very first spot, threw the flasher over. My mate Brandon flipped over the side before I did. I pretty much heard him laughing through his snorkel and asked him what it's like. And he just said, "There's Wahoo." Yeah, we ditched the guns into the water and flipped over. And there was a school of probably about 15 Wahoo moving straight in as soon as we flipped over the side.
Wow.
It's awful.
So was the big fella, was he in that first school?
No. The first day, I think there was maybe 5 or 6 fish shot between us all. They were all, the biggest one was just over 40, and the smallest was 28, I think.
Yep. Wow.
But the very first fish that was shot was a mid-30s model, I think, and that was our reckoning when we first jumped in and had a look at, thinking that there was 15 to 20 kilo Wahoo swimming around us, and 70-metre viz showed us that they were actually 20 kilos larger than they looked.
Oh, wow.
I just come out of diving a clean 5 to 10 metre viz in New Zealand, so it was definitely a sharp adjustment for me.
Yeah.
And on that first day in the water, did you find yourself taking long shots, John?
No, I have dove crystal clear water a few times before, so I definitely took a little bit of judging and gauging, but I think I took 2 Wahoo on that first day, and there were no missed shots or loss of fish, but we did manage to get pretty close to them for the shots.
Even though you'd done it before and you had some experience, do you have some tricks for helping to assess the kind of the distance you are from a fish?
Yeah, so I actually learnt it on this trip beforehand. I wouldn't have actually been able to tell in crystal clean water the size of the Wahoo apart, and I've definitely used it a lot since. But the biggest thing I learnt was, especially with larger Wahoo, is you'll always tell on their the size of their belly. Usually will give it away. Yeah, because they're a pretty pencil-like fish, but when they start getting girth on them and a big belly, and then you start, like all fish, you start seeing the chiseled features of their heads and that. But yeah, definitely the belly's what gave it away. Any fish that came in, we could see when they were 30 or 40 metres out that they were going to be like 50 plus or something by looking at the size of them.
The thing you shot, I remember looking at a photo of it and I was just like, that thing looks prehistoric. It looks like a friggin' dinosaur. What day did you shoot that?
Yeah, so that one was on the second day. It was the first fish of the day on the second day. I suppose we needed that first day to warm up to everything. G definitely helped us out and taught us a fair bit of the Wahoo in that area. He's super knowledgeable.
So who's this G guy? Sorry, I just want to interrupt your story.
Yeah,
What's his name?
No worries. So Gerard Grave, a lot of people would have heard of him, or a lot of people would have been lucky enough to dive with him as well. He's an insanely talented diver out of French Polynesia. He's pretty much come out of school and spent his whole life moving between islands, pro fishing, spearfishing, just spending time in the water really, and yeah, just the knowledge he has anywhere on the reef and what's happening and what he thinks going to happen is second to none in French Polynesia.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, the Wahoo on the second day, same thing. We jumped in the water and there was a few Wahoo getting around. By this stage, like I got two of PV Wahoo on the first day, and we're pretty much waiting for larger ones now, because I had heard all the stories before we went over. The guys have shot like the 45 to 50 kilo fish before, so that was pretty much the goal of the trip, to try and take a 50 kilo fish. And I think Brandon must have shot one Wahoo for the morning, possibly, and then a school came in, and there was myself, Brandon, and G floating in the water, and G actually took a dive at the fish, but he was a bit out of range, and on his way back up he looked over to me and gave the 5 signal with his hand, saying that he reckons that one was over 50 kilos.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I waited for it to come in a little bit closer and got the quartering front on swim at it and got on top of it pretty much, sunk down to its level and its turn that little bit and took the shot. I was aiming for the brain at the time. It was pretty much the shot we went for while we were there, was trying to go for the brain shot. That way, if you either turn its lights out or if you fell a bit low in the shot, you'd get a solid slip tip holding shot through the gill plates.
Yep.
But unfortunately, this is I was out of range on that shot. You can actually hear me in my GoPro footage of exchanging a few words when I seen the shot land. It just clipped the bottom of the gill plate, which was a bit too low for my liking, because it's a good chance of ripping out once you're low on the gill plates there. But the fish had sped off in typical Wahoo form, ripping floats and float lines past me, and it was just swimming as flat out as I could just to try and catch up to my float from then on. And I could see the fish most of the time and all the sharks swimming in its direction.
Yep.
But, it wasn't until the line went slack that I started worrying about losing the fish. And then I thought I had at one stage, because the line was slack, and I started slowly taking up line, and then I got firm solid response from it again. So at that point there was a bit of excitement, and we just tried to swim with it, playing the fish as light as possible until we could get to it, and then slowly tickled it up. And the biggest part of landing the fish was the sharks not eating it, really. I think there's a big part in your gear rigging and your shot placement for your Wahoo in these situations, but at the end of the day, if the sharks are going to eat it, or you're going to manage to eat it, really.
Yeah, right.
That was my experience anyway.
Yeah, you mentioned that you got the front on quartering swim at it. Can you explain to the listeners what that means?
Well, in my experience anyway, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have hunted Wahoo a fair bit more than myself as well, and they might have different opinions. But for me, I've found for Wahoo, not so much swimming away from them, but you want to be able to approach them coming down on top of them as relaxed as possible, not being a predator or making any fast movements towards them. But if they're curious on you and coming in towards you, you should be able to slowly approach them until you're in range, if they're going to be a fish that's going to give you a shot. But obviously this changes everywhere. I haven't hunted Wahoo in Hawaii, and from what I've heard over there, it's a totally different kettle of fish again.
Okay. All right. So, you landed that fish. What happens then? You go straight back in. Is this, you had all the official scales and everything ready to go? Because we've all seen the photos. There's just a whopping Wahoo hanging out of a tree on the beach, tied up with a bit of string, and then you send that off, all your records off. How did you go about that? Did you take your scales with you? Were you all geared up and ready to go for a world record?
No, not at all. I actually wasn't going for world records for that trip. That trip was just me just needing to get out of everywhere and have a bit of time to myself. Everything was getting a bit too much, so I went on that trip. Gerard actually brought the certified scales, and he was the first one that dawned it on me for the that we need to go in straight away regarding the record, because I pulled it in and it was obviously a large Wahoo, but I hadn't actually thought initially about the record. And he goes, "This one probably could be a record. We should go and weigh it straight away instead of waiting out there any longer." So we headed on in and dragged it along the pier and hung it up in the first time we hung it up, actually, we used a bit of cord that must have been a little bit too light for it, and it snapped and landed straight in one of the locals' hands. So he nearly got a good set of chompers to the arm, but we managed to find a little bit more sturdy rope and recalibrated everything and went for a second time and weighed it up, and that's when it all dawned. It was a record.
Yeah, incredible.
Were you stoked, John, that you shot a record? I mean, you said you weren't really aiming for it. You were more just trying to get away on this trip. I mean, some guys like chasing the records thing. It's kind of their buzz, and they live for that fish of a lifetime. Is that kind of the way you are? Because I mean, after looking at the photos, you'd assume that you chase trophies because you got 2 in 2 days.
Yeah, it's a funny one, really. I've never actually been one for records. Like we've shot between me and my dive partners, we've shot a few Aussie records off Gladstone here, and we filleted and ate them all really. Same with that. Obviously, a world record's probably a fair bit more prestigious of fish to take, and yeah, I was definitely ecstatic. I was super excited at the time, but I wouldn't say I was just there to chase trophies or anything for sure. I was actually a bit confused at the end of the day. I wasn't drinking at the time, and usually I'd have a beer to celebrate, but I ended up finding myself just pacing up and down the beach, wondering what's going to happen the next day.
In French Polynesia there, do they have carver like a lot of the other Polynesian islands?
I'm not sure, actually. Where we were, there wasn't any carver around. I think carver's a bit more Fiji, PNG.
Fijian, Tongan.
Yeah,
okay.
I could be wrong, though. I'm not 100% on that one.
Because some nights when I spent a month in Tonga, I mean, I would have ditched alcohol for a good carver night anytime. It was good. It was good fun. But cool. All right. So the next day you headed back out again, and unfortunately you met a really huge dogtooth.
Yeah. So the funny part of the story, a bit of pre-story I should say about it, is one of my mates before I left New Zealand actually told me not to come back without a 100-pound wahoo. So I actually talked to him that night, and he was laughing at the whole scenario of him saying that and it actually happening. And you've had Darren Shields on here.
Yep.
His son Jackson actually messaged me that night as well and was saying congratulations, man, and said there must be some big doggies there as well. Go try and take a 200-pound doggy tomorrow. And I actually messaged him back and said, there's a few spots we might go have a look and we'll see what we can come up with. Not thinking that something like that would come about, to be honest. But yeah, so we went out the next day, and it was a bit of a quieter day and all, really. We jumped in the water and there wasn't much fish around. We didn't see too much wahoo. I think one school of dolphin fish came in, mahi-mahi, and we took one of them each for dinner, and it was getting a bit closer to the middle of the day where we usually go in and have lunch. So we thought we'd just cruise out to a drop-off and have a quick look to see what was about for just a bit of a reconnaissance mission. And we got dropped in the water and must have been dropped in a little bit too close, so we started swimming towards the ledge. And once we got out to the ledge, pretty much instantaneously, we had flashes down and two doggies come up out of the blue, and it's just look at the flashes, and there was a small one which was estimated around 50 kilos, and then a much bigger one.
Yeah, you wouldn't shoot that, would you?
Oh, not a 50 kilo one. He's a baby.
Let it go.
He'll come back next year bigger.
Yeah, the 50 kilo one would have been definitely a memorable fish easily.
Yeah.
But so those two fish come up, and there was pretty much no pause. It was just straight into a duck dive, and started swimming down the flasher. And I managed to look over just to check that my mate hadn't already dove, and he had dove at the same time as me, but he was about 5 meters back up behind me. So I continued down. I thought I had to jump on that one, so I wasn't going to pull out. And I just pretty much just locked on the larger fish, keeping an eyesight on it and swimming until I hit the 18-meter mark, and I started getting into free fall and kept cruising down, and he just started growing larger and larger into just a massive toad of a fish. And I was estimating him around probably 80 kilos at the time. And I got trying to close the gap, got in closer and closer and closer, and I thought I was going to get a headshot on him. It was pretty much a quartering away, angled down, perfect shot for a brain shot if I could have got close enough. But he had other ideas and started taking off a bit. And I've seen his tail move once, twice, and he was just about to kick it a third time just to take off out of sight. And I managed to squeeze the trigger and get a shot in. And pretty much anyone that's shot any size dogtooth knows what happens from there. All hell breaks loose. I turned for the surface after that, and I think it was about at 20 metres. My 30-metre float line had already surpassed me, and my first two foam floats I had on had ripped past me, and behind that I had a Reef 100-foot bungee, and that had stretched out fully, and just before I hit the surface, my Reef 3 atmosphere float took off as well.
Wow. So how many floats did you have on?
Two floats. It's like there was two foam floats, like your commercial yellow foam floats that were tied into one, and then a bungee, and then a Reef 3 atmosphere. I originally had two Reef 3 atmospheres, but on the first day, the inflation piece out of the Reef exploded on one of the Wahoo that I shot, so I had to get some help there and rig up a makeshift float.
All right. Sounds like it did the job, though.
Yeah, it actually worked really well for the Wahoo. It was a nice little small pull-under float that didn't put too much pressure on them when they took off, and it's a nice stretchy bungee and a larger float at the back.
Yeah, right.
All right. And how long did this battle last?
For the doggy, pretty much I hit the surface, and there was maybe 5 minutes of the float going down to 20 metres and coming back up, down to 20 metres and coming back up. I'm not exactly sure what was going on there, because I think the fish could have taken it out of sight straight away if he wanted to, but I was guessing maybe he's made it to the bottom and the line must have been caught on a bit of reef or something at that stage, the actual float line, and he pulling the float and getting pulled back and forth with being wrapped on the bottom maybe. And then after 5 minutes, the float just disappeared out of sight into 70-metre viz. I've actually got footage of us swimming after it and just waving goodbye to it, and I thought that was the last I'd see of it.
Yeah.
But so it disappeared out of sight, and we continued to swim along for a bit longer, and eventually the float come rocketing back up towards the surface at a pace that I thought it had ripped out at the time. So I was the heart sank a little bit, but the float actually stopped in Tombstone just before the surface, which was a bit exciting. Just knew it was all back on. So the next little while after that, we were playing the fish super softly. I just wasn't confident on the shot, so I just really didn't know whether it was going to rip it out if I started trying to rip it to the surface or not. So I would pull a few meters in, and then it would start swimming a bit more. So I'd let a few meters out as it would pull the tension out of me, and then played it for a good 5 minutes before I could get it up to near the surface. And then by the time I got it up to about 15 meters, it was pretty much dead and floating. But I could see the slip tip was just sitting on the inside of the fish's skin by this stage. It pulled all the way back through. So I got a second shotgun and put a shaft straight through the brain and rolled it over, and that was the end of it.
You now, John, when you got past the other gun, you unloaded it, reloaded it for yourself, didn't you? Yeah.
So take the rubber off, put the rubber back on.
Just wanted to clarify, mate. I thought I might catch you out there. For anyone that doesn't know the rules of second shotting fish for world records, if someone gives you a second shot gun to finish off the fish, you've got to reload the gun yourself, otherwise it doesn't count. So it's one of those things. Keep that in mind if you're chasing records.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, good, interesting. What gun were you using, John? I'm curious.
Yeah, I was using a 1.4 King Venom aimright gun with 416s and an 8mm shaft on it.
Okay, sounds like a weapon.
Yeah, it was really good actually. It shot super accurate, super fast. I didn't have any problems with it. I could happily dive to the 30-metre mark with it still. It wasn't too big and bulky. I think the only downside of it is that at four bands on a carbon gun and an 8mm shaft, you're getting a lot of recoil.
Yep.
Yeah, was there any part of your gear, like, just because you used full bungee, Reef 3 atmosphere floats, you used smaller floats to soften the impact of the fast swimming fish. That's another one that people, newcomers to blue water hunting, should realise. So you've got all this stuff to soften up the fish. Was there any part of your equipment that you would improve or you didn't like, or is there something you do differently now?
I don't know what the case is with the Reef floats now, but the reason my inflation piece blew on the Reef float was it just had zippy ties on it where it went in, and I don't know if that was, I bought those floats new, but they were really old, so I don't know if that was that's how it was done back in the day or not. or if something had happened and someone else had done something previously. But I after that trip, I learnt to change over, and I just put stainless steel hose clamps on that section of the floats. So that was definitely one thing that I altered in my gear. But other than that, gear, setting up for gear and what you're going to use it for is a big part of my prep. I'll spend a week or two just sitting there staring at my gear and playing around with it.
Just another quick question. So September, French Polynesia, what sort of wetsuit, like thickness-wise, do you use at that time of year over there?
That time of the year, I was using a 3mm. A 3mm moire top and 3mm Reef bottoms, bit of a mix and match. For me, it was fine because I've come out of New Zealand, and the 3mm was fine. It's like around the 23-degree water mark. A lot of people probably would get cold though in a 3mm, especially when you're out in like a k and a half of water, just waiting for hours on end for something to come up in a burley trail.
Yeah, fair enough. Yep.
So I think one of your previous episodes with Jagger, he was saying that he uses a 5mm, and I can understand someone in the tropics for sure, or people that are used to warm water would definitely, floating around, would get cold after a bit.
Turbo would have a 7mm one for sure, John.
Yeah, get the 7 out, floating around, Michelin Man style.
Just on my legs, just to fatten them out a bit, really, and just a 3mm on the top. All right.
Hey, John, I wanted to ask, so are those videos of those catches online?
No, they're not. I'm a bit slack with all my footage. I don't really share anything these days. So I've got an Instagram account that I put a few photos up every now and then, but I've deleted Facebook and like all my footage. I've got footage of shark attack and all sorts of stuff built up in there. Mate might put into a video one day, but it's something that I've just always filmed just for me and mates. I've never really got into making movies that much.
Is that
okay?
Is that did you delete Facebook because of all the fame that ensued after those world records?
No, not really. I think for me, I just deleted Facebook because I wasted a lot of time on there, really, and it was just, I found myself losing contact with people face to face a fair bit. So I've kept my Instagram if people want to contact me via that, but other than that, I try to avoid it all a little bit more. It's disadvantage. It is a bit of a disadvantage at times keeping up with stuff in the spearfishing community and that for sure. But for me, I'm a little bit kicking myself a bit at times.
We'll link your Insta up in the show notes, John, so people can maybe even just come and have a look, and we'll put the pictures of those two fish up in the show notes page as well, because they're some fantastic looking fish. They're a fish of a lifetime, that's for sure.
And we need all the help we can get on social media. We're dying. All right. Just like for like.
I wanted to briefly shoot back to the start of your spearfishing again, John, because I think you're quite good at explaining a few things. What was your biggest obstacle, or the thing you struggled with the most when you were starting out, apart from latching on to and identifying species and things like that? What else did you struggle with?
Yeah, information on training and just spearfishing in general, like the content you guys offer. All that sort of stuff was hard to come by when we first started out. Like there was pretty much your method of learning was you and your mate hanging out on a Friday night watching videos like Blue Vision and Liquid Focus from Brett Verco and all those sort of old school films. And we used to do a little bit of pool training, but we didn't know what we were doing really at the time. It was just doing slow 50-meter swims in the pool, having a chat at the end, doing another one. So information and training options, safety training, all that sort of stuff that's readily available on YouTube these days. All that sort of stuff was very hard to come by. So that was the hardest for me.
So you did some pool training with some mates, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
To help you with your free diving.
Yep. So we did a bit of pool training. More at the start, it was just for spearfishing, but later on, it developed into free diving. I got into competitive free diving.
Oh, cool.
So that was definitely something that all tied in with spearfishing as well. Yeah.
Did you do that with Fran Rose or Judgy up there in Gladstone at the time?
Yeah, a bit of both actually. I met Fran. Fran was a big pivoting point in my spearfishing career for me. I actually met her on a day where me and a mate, he was 16 at the time, I was 17, and we were out diving wrecks, diving a wreck that was in the 30-metre mark, and he had a blackout that day. We were obviously just too young and competitive, and we were making 30 metres all right for a couple of seconds and being able to shoot fish, but we definitely weren't 30-metre divers at that stage. And with us both competing against each other, he ended up unfortunately having a blackout. And I ran into Fran that afternoon, who had just moved to Gladstone, and that's pretty much where the freediving side of it all kicked off here in Gladstone for all us boys. She helped us along in leaps and bounds. Yeah, and like you said, Judgy as well. Judgy was, me and my best mate Dave and Judgy all shared a house at one stage for a year or so. And yeah, he was Judge's actually probably one of the main people to thank for my mate being successfully rescued from that blackout, because there were a few guys in the spearfishing community. Judgy was one of them that were starting to get a bit worried about us at our age, 16 and 17, and the depths we were diving. So Judgy actually took it upon himself before he even knew us that well. He'd been up and dove with Gordy a few times, which is Dave's dad. They actually recorded a video of a res doing a safety briefing on blackouts and sent it up to us, and we used to watch it religiously. And I think a good part of watching that video was having that second nature information on hand that day that he did black out.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, good stuff.
Awesome.
Good stuff.
All right, so we like Wayne, and we've always had a good relationship with him. He's been great and influential in our own diving. So, and his son as well now. We follow Ant as well. All right, so you got involved with the freediving as well, John. What current challenges do you face, and how are you facing them?
I've got to be a bit careful how I say this one, but I think my current challenge at the moment is diving with my girlfriend, actually. She'll be listening to this too. But no.
Here we go. Here comes a political speech.
Pretty much for the last couple of years, I've been moving around a fair bit. So my girlfriend and I have both been to each other's dive partners, because we're definitely our usual crews that we would have grown up with aren't in the locations that we're with, which has been good. It's we love diving with each other. She's definitely coming along in leaps and bounds, and absolute pleasure is just seeing her do everything for the first time. But the hard part is, I've found, is learning to gel as a team with two different styles of diving. So it's something that we work towards a fair bit at the moment. I'm a fair bit more relaxed with my diving, in the point where I'll go out and just let whatever happen unfold in front of me and take it from there, see what the currents are doing, see what the fish are doing, and decide what I'll target from there, which I think is a hard style to learn off for her. So we end up in the odd argument or tackle out in the surf. But no, she's it's something that's come along a long way.
So she's what is she's she wants to target a particular species, does she? Like, she has a fish in mind that she wants to go and chase?
Yeah, I think pretty much. It's the same as when we're all starting out. We will have our species that we want to target and our species that we want to tick off the list, and that's the best part about diving with her, and the part I love really is she's got so many goals that she wants to achieve, and if I can be there to help her do it and actually witness her doing it, it's a pretty enjoyable feat.
Yeah, wicked. Show sponsor PenetratorFins.com have got an all-new series of carbon fibre blades available. If you go and check out the Pyro Camo carbon blades, and these are an all-new series from Larry. They've got improved graphics, finish and flex curve, and they've got the same 25-degree toe angle for efficient surface fitting, a 72cm working blade. They're extremely lightweight at only 325 grams, and they've got that same great wide water channeling that Larry's blades have. This just allows for a lot less fatigue, lower oxygen consumption, and they just have you jetting through the water. Check them out at penetratorfins.com. You can use the code NoobSpearo and save yourself $20 if you do decide to purchase. Is it time to top up your t-shirt drawer? then head over to noobspearo.com and get your hands on our black shirt or our white shirt. Pretty simple. They're $35 Australian each. Use the code free shipping until Christmas time this year and top up your t-shirt drawer with something you actually like. And support the show as well while you're doing it. That's just noobspearo.com. Thank you. All right, cool. Let's move along, John. Hunting technique. What's your favourite hunting technique, and how do you apply it effectively? And maybe you could walk us through, some of the coaching you've given to your girlfriend about, how to employ some of these techniques effectively.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose with the hunting technique, my style of hunting is just being super relaxed, which you've probably heard from a lot of people. But a few little things that I've always tried to take into account with my hunting is don't be an obvious predator. Fish can sense if you're agitated, if you're super keen on trying to shoot it. Obviously, like you hear people trying to shoot Spanish mackerel for the first time, and the Spanish never lets them get close, or trying to shoot wahoo for the first time. A lot of that comes down to the fish sensing what you're feeling. I think if you're giving off a hard vibe, or if you're kicking too fast, if you can just manage to slow down a little bit and just relax, then a lot of times the fish will just present themselves a lot more for you. That ties in with a lot of other stuff, like taking in your surroundings a lot more than just like search and destroy. If you can actually relax a little bit more and watch what the bait fish are doing, feel what the current's doing, what direction the sun's coming from, all that sort of stuff, you can definitely improve your chances a lot more. And learning fish body language, I think, is a really big one. Like I was talking about the trout before. Like all this sort of stuff really just comes with experience and time in the water. But if you can start focusing on fish body language a little bit more, watch what they're doing in the leading up of you trying to approach them, instead of just focusing on where you're going to try and shoot them, you'll definitely learn a lot more about what the fish is going to do and how to approach them, whether you need to back off and not be so aggressive, or whether you need to just turn around and swim away from the fish and try and get its curiosity up. Just all sorts of stuff like that, I suppose.
Hey, John, speaking of trout, last couple of times we've been up to the reef around, say, Fitzroy, we've noticed that the bigger coral trout will just slowly but surely, just out of range, start heading off in the other direction time and time again. And I've had a few divers on board that all say the same thing. Much better than me, so it's not just me, mate. What are your tips? Is that something that you've seen with the bigger trout? Have you got any advice there?
Yeah, for sure. In my experience, don't try and approach them from the bottom. Okay. Your best bet is getting over top of them, spotting them from the surface. Obviously, it's not always possible if it's dirty or water, but if you can spot them from the top, approach them from the top or just on a slight angle, and just be relaxed. If you can get into a free fall, if it's deep enough, just have your gun pointed out and slightly try and go into an aim of where you want to hit the fish, and just let yourself get closer and closer. And like that's where the body language parts comes in. If you can learn to read a fish's body language, you're going to know that the fish is about to swim away, or the fish is just going to sit there and you can swim up to it and poke it.
Yeah, right, okay. So free fall sounds like the key there. Well, I'm rarely in free fall mode, so I might just put a couple extra weights on and just make a 5 to 10 metre free fall.
So you can free fall from the surface.
And then I'll drown.
To the bottom of the bathtub.
Shut up, idiot. All right, that's really, really good advice, mate. I like it. Have we covered hunting technique? John, is there anything else you want to add?
I suppose the only other thing I could really say is, just try and, again, it's a thing that'll come with experience and time in the water, but just try and adopt an attitude that going home empty-handed is not a problem at the end of the day. Like, time in the water is time well spent. So if you can just be a bit more relaxed and not need to take anything you see, that's just a little handy hint. And trying to calm yourself down a little bit more and getting fish to come in is just not be too worried about going home empty-handed.
Yeah, nice.
It's not too bad once you've had ciguatera. You don't mind too much if you don't come home with fish. It can be like Russian roulette there for a few months. So, yeah, it's not too
bad. sometimes you're sitting on the boat on the way back in and you haven't shot anything and you look at each other and go, yes, I don't have to fillet fish today.
Got a few beers in your hand by that stage too, not having to worry about too much extra for the rest of the day.
Yeah, but it's never as bad. It's never that bad though. You know, when you're starting out, you always want to go home with 5 fish, so you got a shot for Instagram. But really, like like you say, you just have fun while you're out there.
Instagram wasn't even around when you started. Don't bullshit us. I think Instagram was years away.
I'm actually just pretending like I know what Instagram is. Really, I'm that old. I don't even know. I'm like, Facebook. Oh, I know Facebook.
And this is why we have 50 followers between us on Instagram.
Yeah, go to Noob Spearo Podcast on Instagram. You can follow Turbo. He's got the best trout pout going. Check it out. All right, John. Next section of the show. Toughest situation. What's the toughest situation you've been in the ocean, and what actions did you take? What was the result, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, this one was a little bit hard for me to decide because we've had a fair few in the ocean. I've had well, I've talked a bit before about my mate blacking out at a young age. I had a bull shark have a swing off my arm about 70k offshore. And another one was when I was in New Zealand, I had a mate that was trying to retrieve some dive gear off a cliffside, fall 7 metres, head first into rocks below and fracture a vertebrae, shatter his wrist, and he had a really bad head wound. He actually landed in the water, but somehow didn't knock himself out, scuttled back up on the rocks, and I found him about 5 minutes later, losing blood pretty quick.
Shit.
So they're probably the top 3, but I don't know. Which ones do you want to hear about?
Let's just hear about the last one first, and then we'll go backwards from there. What was the lesson? What happened to your mate? So you're walking back from a spearing session, and he fell off a cliff.
Oh, we're actually in a boat, and there's a little island out of a place called Pyro in New Zealand. And the previous day, he had a bit of a bad luck where he had his boat anchored there and he was diving, and the boat anchor got severed off a sharp bit on the front of the boat, and the wind swept the boat away. So they climbed up onto the top of this little rock to try and wave another boat down, and they left their dive gear there. And so the very next day we turned up to go diving, and I said I'd take him out there and we'll go for a dive, and while we're there he can go up and retrieve his mask. And we were swimming around having a look for some fish, and he just said, oh, look, I'm just going to climb up and grab my mask that I left up there yesterday. I said, no worries. And we were back in the boat. It would have been about 5 minutes since he'd climbed up and over the other side of this rock. And it was just one of those sixth sense type things. Something didn't quite feel right. And I told the young bloke that was with us to jump in the boat and we'll go around the other side and have a look. And we were only in a little, like 12-foot tinny, and we went around the other side, and I couldn't see him anywhere in the water. Like when you're scanning to pick up a Spearo, you're only looking in the water, you're not looking up at the rocks. And it was a fair washy in there, and the young bloke actually spotted him up on the rocks, and he said, oh, I think that's him up there. And I looked up, and just on a little ledge above the waterline, he was there curled over, pretty much just being able to move his hand, like making a high five, like a spreaded hand of 5 fingers, trying to wave to us, look draped over a rock, and just something didn't look right. So I ditched all my weight and grabbed a float and told the young bloke to wait out there, and swam on in and timed the swell to be able to launch myself up onto the rocks. And yeah, I found him pretty banged up. He was just losing blood from the head pretty quick and just repeating himself, didn't really know what was going on. And so I managed to get out of him that he'd fallen from the top at that stage. And he's 6'4", this bloke, and 104 kilos too. So that was a challenge from there. But there was an island not far away that I managed to yell the young bloke to turn around and fly over and call for help, call for an evac or something. Yeah. And before he left, I jumped back off into the water, swam back and grabbed a life vest out of the boat. And that's where I explained to him to head over to the shore and get help. And I got back to him, and he was starting to pass out and come back to at this stage. And I put his feet up in a bit more of a vertical position, and that started bringing him back around a little bit more. But he was on blood thinning medication. That's why he was losing a lot of blood at the time as well. And so we got his feet up and got a life vest on him just in case, because the swell was right there. And wasn't by the time I'd got a life vest on him and taken his weight. He had a chest harness on. I've got his chest harness off. The water police actually turned up. They happened to be at the jetty of the island that was there, and they couldn't get in close enough to where we were, but I swam out to him and explained the situation and said that he's losing blood quick and he's on blood thinning medication. I don't think we've got time to wait for an evac helicopter or anything. So we made the call to try and get him off and into the boat. So I swam back and made sure his life vest was on right, and I ended up he was still pretty dazed and repeating himself, but I managed to get him to put his feet over the edge of the ledge. And I just said, look, we've got to get you in the water, man, and over to the boat. And he just looked at me and said, look, man, I don't know what's going on at the moment. You're just going to have to do everything for me. Just don't let me drown once I hit the water. And
wow.
So, yeah.
That's severe, man.
Sorry?
That's crazy. It's a crazy situation.
Yeah. So it wasn't, from there it wasn't too bad. I pretty much just timed a bit of swell and kicked him into the ocean and jumped in after him. And because he was such a big bloke and just negatively buoyant too, like I had his weight off, but he still just sunk like a rock once he hit the water. Like I hit the water with him, and got him straight back up to the surface. He was conscious enough like to hold his breath for those couple of seconds, but yeah, we got him to the surface and back to the police boat, and then we tried to support him as much as possible and get him up into the back of the boat. Luckily, they had a tuna door, so it wasn't too bad. And from there, we raced him back to shore, and there was a helicopter waiting for us, and got him off to hospital.
Wow. Yeah, right. And how is he now?
Yeah. No, he's doing fine now. He had a fairly slow recovery because he had a fractured vertebrae and shattered wrist and a few other bumps and pieces. But vertebrae in his neck. Yeah, in his spine somewhere. I'm not exactly sure whereabouts, but yeah.
And
poor bugger.
How big was the fall? Do you know, like meters? How many meters?
7 meters.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so he done well. Like he was fully weighted too. Had a big chest plate on, which would have been like six kilos of weight on his chest, plus more around his waist, and head first into the rocks. But how he didn't drown was amazing to me. Like I don't know how he didn't knock himself out on the rocks and then bounce into the water and drowned. But he managed to scramble himself with all that damage back up onto the rocks to wait enough time for us to get there.
Here's a Kiwi bloke though, yeah?
Yeah. Bloke from Auckland.
Tough as nails.
Tough as nails.
I'm glad he's all right. I mean, what are the takeaways from that? I mean, it sounds like everything went pretty well. And, you got to him pretty fast after he'd had a fall. And, you had some, the young fellow was able to call for support, and luckily the police boat was close. I mean, what else could you do in that situation? Is there anything, these things happen, I guess?
Yeah, just keeping a cool head's the biggest thing. I can't stress enough for people to be first aid and O2 administrated trained. It's something I try and keep current in. It's helped us a fair bit over the years, but I suppose just from a fair few of our previous incidents, I was able to keep a level head in a situation like that, and just the little things like being able to know when to elevate his feet to keep the blood going through, and keeping him a bit more conscious for us, and being cool-headed enough to know that there's somewhere nearby, send someone for help, someone can stay. And the rest of the stuff is you'll just make it up as you go, I think. Like the decision to get him off the rock instead of waiting for an air vac, it was just at the time we didn't want him to lose too much more blood, so it's just the executive decision on the day, I think.
Yeah, nice. I really want to hear about your bull shark story too, John. What happened there?
The bull shark story, I think it was 2009. Me and my two mates, the main blokes I've dived with most of my life, Davey Jensen, Nat Keane, we're out diving a little shoal off the side of Lamont Reef, and it was pretty early on in the morning. We just jumped in and we were drifting over this shoal, and it was showing pretty promising sign fish, crystal clean water. It was like 35 metre vis, as good as it gets in the bunker grip, really. Mm-hmm. And I just dove down and shot a mangrove jack, but it's stone cold. Just my flopper happened to catch on a bit of plate coral, so it was sitting at the bottom in 20 metres. And I've let my line out and got back to the surface. And my mate Natty was right beside me, and we were face to face, just talking while I was catching my breath. Had our heads above the water for a second, and after that, it was just it was like being being shoulder charged by one of the All Black props, really. All I felt was just like, probably my recall's probably not the best person to tell the story because there was a fair bit of shock and everything involved, but pretty much I see my mate in front of me just get shaken a touch as it brushed him on the way past, and then something just hit me in the chest at full speed and launched me up to about my waist out of the water.
Wow.
As I fell back into the water, there was just a grey mass in front of me, like a dark mass in front of me, and there was a lot of whitewash, and then it was gone. And like the time frame's a bit hazy here because like I was in shock, so what felt like 3 minutes was probably 10 seconds. But all I remember is looking around, and next minute there was about a 2 metre blood cloud around me, radius around me, and my mate Nat, that was right beside me, just lunged. And at this stage I was like patting down my chest, wondering where I was bitten, thinking that a chunk of my chest or waist must have been hit. And then I started to come out of shock a little bit, enough to see that my mate Nat had hold of my arm, trying to stem the bleeding out of my arm.
Wow. Now, I said to you off air, we were talking, I was asking you about that, and I saw pictures of you on the internet sitting there in hospital, and it just looked like you had quite a small bandage around your arm. And I said, oh, you got bitten by a bull shark. It didn't look like much, just sort of not much of an event, but it kind of was, mate. What sort of damage did it do?
So I was lucky enough to have a pretty good plastic surgeon do it all up, so it's just pretty much, now it just looks like a scar, a full ringed scar around my wrist and a little bit messy bit up into my hand. But at the time, it pretty much peeled my wrist like a banana. There was just two bones sitting there, and it took out 2 nerves, most of the muscles and tendons, and an artery.
Wow. And you're, and just to put that into perspective, you're at Lamont Reef, so what are you, 40 mile?
70k offshore, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
But luckily enough that we knew Heron Island wasn't too far away. It was about an 18-minute trip to Heron, so yeah, after it hit me, it was pretty much get me back to the boat as soon as possible. So, which was another stroke of luck too, because my mate Dave, who was actually in the boat, he was actually drifting behind the boat and just seen some Spanish mackerel come through, and he was just about to take a shot, but being boaty, he said, I thought he better not. So he jumped back in the boat, and he actually seen the whole thing unfold from the boat. So he was right on top of us within a couple of minutes, and they tried to get me in the boat. That was probably one of the worst parts of the day. Was Natty jumped in the boat to try and help Dave drag me in, and he's let go of my arm, and the first reaction was to try and stem the bleeding. So I went to grab my arm, and I've just grabbed a handful of bones.
Oh,
so that was a bit of a yuck, stomach churning feeling I can still feel now. But luckily, we were a pretty tight dive team, and we'd all done a fair bit of. Natty had done a heap of life saving, and we'd all been pretty medically trained. So it was in the boat, feet up, tourniquets. They started shoving rags and shirts into my arm, and then tying shirts around those rags. And then Natty's sole job was there, just squeezing my arm. And Dave kicked it into gear, and we started heading for Heron Island.
Wow. And what, you just got a helicopter from Heron to the mainland?
Yeah. So we reached Heron Island, and they from there they took us into a little medical ward and tried to start shoving a few more gauze and that down on my arm to slow the bleeding. And they brought a full medical team out and done blood transfusions on the island, because I'd lost too much blood to move. And then, luckily they got a few blood transfusions into me, and then got me to Rockhampton, changed from a helicopter to a plane, and flown to Brisbane from there.
Wow. That's a very, very close call. I'm glad I played it down to you on the phone. I feel a bit silly now. It's nothing, mate. You just got a little bite on the wrist. Yeah. Shit. All right. Was there another tough situation? I mean, you seem.
No. We're gonna move along.
All right.
Let's just let's briefly have a message from our sponsors.
Are we still? Is that Cold Sore Cream Company still one of the sponsors?
They definitely are. So with two blokes like you and me, I'm thinking about getting KY jelly on next.
G'day guys, if you're new to spearfishing, I highly recommend listening to our episode Freediving for Spearfishing with Pete Ryder. Pete is an entrepreneur and an excellent freedive instructor, and he has come up with two great courses, the 10-metre freedive and the 5-minute freediver. I've used the 5-minute freediver to increase my bottom time, found it incredibly useful for my trip to the Coral Sea, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. His other course, the 10-metre freediver, is a great resource for those just starting out that literally want to get to 10 metres, and this course will help you learn proper breathing technique and some of the safety aspects associated with freediving.
Use the code NoobSpiro to save 20% on all of Pete's courses. He's put together this deal just for listeners of the show. That's at howtofreedive.com. Use the code NoobSpiro.
Hey guys, the Adreno Easter sale is on March 17 to April 15. It's absolutely massive. Savings are store-wide. Do yourself a favour, check it out online at spearfishing.com.au, and the best thing about it this year is you can use the Noob Spiro code at checkout. So if you spend over $200, you save $20. Bargain. We all love savings, especially when they're savings on savings. So check it out. That's at spearfishing.com.au or in-store at Adreno, Wollongabba, Sydney and Melbourne.
Hey, can you break back into Veterans Vault, Brown?
Yes.
What have you organised?
Well, why don't we ask John? John, let's. It's time for Veterans Vault, and as always, Shrek and I, well, particularly me, I'm very prepared, mate. What have you, prepared for Veterans Vault?
Yeah, I found it pretty hard to think of what I was going to say for this one, but I just wrote a few things down pretty much on how to establish the bigger picture of the ocean environment and trying to make it a better diver from a young age. Something that I definitely had to work pretty hard towards, but I think could definitely help a lot of younger people out there.
Yeah, this is a great one. I remember working on this. All right. So, all right, take us through that. John, how can we become better at learning the ocean environment?
Yeah, so pretty much what I've come to believe anyway over the years that I've been spearfishing for now anyway is just everything in the ocean happens in cycles, and the quicker you can discover all the different little parts and segments of these cycles, the quicker you'll get the bigger picture of where the fish are going to be and what time of the year and what you're looking for, really.
Okay. All right.
A few different points that I pretty much wrote down that could probably help you get towards it, and I don't think anyone will ever fully understand the ocean, but something that's definitely going to help you get a little bit more of an idea is one, don't believe everything that you hear. Try and take as much on board, but try and prove it possible and correct yourself before you set it in concrete.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing that's helped me over the years is keeping a diary.
Okay.
A lot of people don't do it, but you'll be surprised on how many of the top Spiros actually keep diaries. People with awesome memories don't need to. It's all just stored up in the vault. But people like myself, I lose my keys and wallet daily, so I have to keep a diary. And the type of things that document in the diary is just everything you see every day you go out. It doesn't have to be super involved, but just try and document as much as you can. Stuff from start with the date that you've went out, the tide, the moon, wind swells, water temp, location, the species you've seen for the day. Anything unusual is always a good one. But if you can document every little thing each day that you've went out, what you've shot, and all the little aspects that most people will overlook, you're going to start getting a vault worth of information that you can go back on, and by eventually cross-referencing all your information, you're going to start to see similarities, and that's pretty much where people start working out where fish are going to be or what conditions they should be looking for and what fish they should be hunting. I think most people just do it without even knowing that.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. Love it, John. Great idea. Keep a dive log. Cool. All right. Tip number 3 for understanding the ocean and from the big picture point of view.
Yeah. Develop your own forecast methods, I think, is a big one. A lot of people rely on other people or just have a hack at the ocean. But if you can spend a little bit more time reading the weather, make it part of the whole spearfishing experience. If you want to become a good spearfisherman, then part of it should be you being a pretty reliable source of reading the weather. So have a few websites. We've always had at least 2 to 3 different websites that we'll check depending on what country we're in or what area we're in, and we always just cross-reference the 3 of them to give yourself the best forecast possible. And through that, you'll eventually see patterns and be able to tell what the weather's doing without even checking these top websites.
It's funny because a lot of the services in Australia, and I think in New Zealand's the same, they base their forecasts off the same data, but they come to sort of different conclusions about what's actually going to happen. So some people say, like, look at 2 reliable apps and split the difference. Well, what's your go-to up there in Gladstone?
Yeah, so it's funny. Most all the websites in Australia come from BOM, Bureau of Meteorology.
Yep.
But BOM for us in Gladstone here anyway. I'm not sure if I haven't been in Gladstone actually diving and living here for a while now, but for the bulk of my career diving when I was here, BOM actually always put 5 to 10 knots extra on all their forecasts. Was our experience.
Okay.
So we used to use what's it called here in Australia? Is it Swell Map or Seabreeze? Seabreeze here in Australia.
Seabreeze.
Yep. So we used to use Seabreeze, which was usually a more accurate one, but they were the ones that would sometimes be well off what it was going to be, where BOM was usually pretty on the money, but they would forecast 5 to 10 knots on top of what it was going to be. So usually we'd forecast between those 2, and then ourselves just read the weather and what it's been doing, and try and make a decision from there. But you're not always going to be right. Sometimes you get caught out still.
Yeah. What I find interesting, I work with an old salt that was a commercial fisherman off Mooloolaba a long time ago, and when I told him, about Seabreeze and I think Willy Weather, and he just looked at me shocked, and he said, "Well, can't you read a weather map?" And I was like, well, that's a good point. He goes, we never had that shit, as he called it. He said we just always, read a weather map, and he's pretty good at it too. So I don't know what more you can get out of these apps as opposed to actually reading, like the weather maps that are produced for us either. So
yeah, there's lots of info. There's lots of info out there that can teach you to read, like read the weather maps a bit better, all your lows and highs and the pressure and all that sort of stuff. I'm not the best with it myself, really, but like a really good app, if anyone hasn't heard of it, is Weather Watch. It's actually a New Zealand app, but they offer everything. You can go on live time, daily updated sea surface temperature charts and everything for free.
Okay. Wow. What was the name of that app?
Weather Watch.
Weather Watch, okay.
They've got some pretty detailed maps. They're definitely probably my favourite app that I've seen in regards to weather.
I'll link that up in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure.
So awesome.
All right. What's our next tip?
Any more tips?
Yeah, I had one more. It was just to learn to enjoy the whole process of discovering all the things to do with either reading the weather or where the fish are, the marks and that. Don't worry about chasing other people's marks or spots or hassling people for it. They'll probably work long and hard for it themselves. If you can learn to enjoy finding it for yourself, you're going to enjoy this spearfishing experience a whole lot more.
Yeah, good point. I've got a question for you. Now, you mentioned earlier, you've got this diary. You look to, say, replicate conditions to chase certain fish. You look at these patterns popping up. Can you give us an example of a fish in an area and what conditions, time of the year, or something that you've learnt? I mean, you don't have to give the whole thing away, but what's just a great example of a fish that you've studied now for a little while and you can see patterns in this fish and being productive for hunting them?
Yeah, for sure. There's, I'd say probably the most recent one that I've found, and I didn't actually get to document this one to the point where to prove it 100% right, but I'd been living in Wollongong for the last couple of months, and I was chasing fish that I hadn't chased a lot of before, just like your flathead and your brim and snapper and stuff like that. And one spot I went to, I found on one of the days I went there was a lot of flathead.
Yep.
And I told a few people about it, not too many people were shooting flathead. They were surprised that I seen them. And I actually wrote the whole day down in my diary, and I went back and had a look at it and found out what time of the tide it was, because I actually dove that spot once or twice after that and haven't seen any. And it wasn't until I went back and had a look and realised that it was a certain moon and the tide was on an outgoing tide. And then I had a look at the location where I'd seen them and realised that where I was in a direct runoff from a creek at the turn of the low. So they're obviously sitting there waiting for bait fish to be washed out of the creek and feed. And just to try and give myself the best chance, I went back to that spot on the exact same moon phase. And there they were.
Perfect.
I've had a similar experience with flathead on an outgoing, and all the monsters came out. They're some of the biggest flathead I've ever seen, and it was at the mouth of a river mouth. So that's interesting. But I haven't seen it. I've only seen it once, and I didn't pay attention to the moon phase. So that is very interesting. Cool.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. All right, let's wrap up Veterans Vault. Awesome. Great job. Next part of the show is the funniest moment. So one of the funniest things you've experienced out spearfishing. I don't know if you've spent much time with blokes like Turbo, but surely you've got a few funny stories there, John?
Yeah, mate, this one wasn't hard at all to come up with. The boys that I dive with are all pretty good characters, and it's always having a good time ahead of product for the fish for the day usually. So there's been a fair few laughs. But the funniest one was actually just a day of unfortunate events, and looking back on it now, it's just a good laugh. We were at 1770, and the Curtis Coast Spearfishing Club was running at the time, and they were doing a social day where everyone was going to head out to, I think it was Fitzroy, and go for a spear. So all the boats rocked up on the sandbar, and we all did the briefing and headed on out. And then just as we got out the bar, the boat we were in, my mate's 16R Haynes Hunter at the time, the motor shut itself, and it would pretty much only do just on 6 knots. It was an old blue band Merc, like should have been in a museum, this thing. And we made the call. We just got on the radio and said, look, everyone go out, have a good day. We'll set up the way in and all that sort of stuff for you guys by the time you get back. And we decided just to head up the coast to go and try and get a dive in. And so it took us about an hour and a half to get up the coast to anywhere diveable, with me sitting on the nose of the boat trying to keep it on the plane if we could. And it was pretty wild too, because every now and then we'd have the motor on full tilt just to get that 6 knots, and every now and then for about 10 seconds it would just kick into full noise. So every now and then I'd be holding on for dear life, and it wasn't too bad. We got up to the spot, and we actually ran into a pretty famous person in the sport and had a bit of an argument up there, which just added to the day. And
can you give us any hints?
Nah, don't want to talk out of school, but it was a heated exchange of words between myself and him about how the etiquette of spearfishing works, and we ended up. It come about because we were diving the same spot, and the reason we chose to dive this same spot is because everywhere else was dirty and we had a broken boat, so we didn't think anyone would mind if we shared a location that was big enough for at least 3 boats to dive. But there was problems over that, so we ended up getting out of the water after the boys went in for a dive. I didn't even get in, and we headed back to shore. And what unravelled on the way back is we're in the same situation. We're sitting on the nose of the boat. Oh, sorry, I was sitting on the nose of the boat. My mate was driving along, and my best mate Maddie has pointed out the side of the boat and said, "Oh, juvenile marlin." A little juvie marlin was just sunning itself near the entrance of 1770, and I've stood up to have a look at it and see where it was. And next minute the motor's just kicked into full noise, and I've just got flung backwards, put my ass straight through the windscreen of the boat, and the noise across the bay with one of the boys falling over in the back of the boat, one bloke hanging on, and me with my ass hanging through the windscreen of the boat. And I don't know, just looking back on it, it's something that we always laugh at.
Nothing like someone's ass through the windscreen, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's a good way to finish up a dive day.
Alrighty. What are we moving on to? Funniest moment? Oh, we're on to Spiro Q&A. This is...
No, we're not. We're on to dive bag.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not even on here. Are we still doing that?
We're always doing dive bag.
Oh, I
Jeepers,
don't
you're a
know.
great anchor man.
It's
So
not even on there.
head to toe, John. Excuse Turbo. What's in your dive bag from head to toe? What equipment are you using on a normal day out spearfishing? And I mean, I know you spear in a few different locations. So what's your Gladstone kit look like?
Yeah, so Gladstone kits are just a 3mm wetsuit. I've got a few different types now. I'm using a Polo sub at the moment, so I've really been enjoying them. They're like a smooth skin. Custom fit, they've definitely, if you can afford the custom fit, they're definitely a great suit. Fins, I'm using the New Zealand made Wahoo fins at the moment. They're just, I use them in New Zealand. I've enjoyed them. I'm actually looking at converting over to some carbon soon, though. I wouldn't mind actually hitting up Ant Judge to make a set. His knowledge and custom made fins that he's coming up I think are going to be pretty second to none. So I'll probably pursue that track. All the guns I'm using is all aim right guns. I've got just about 4 various sizes, 2 small ones, a 1 meter, a 1.2 reel gun.
Okay.
130 and my big 140.
No roller guns.
No, I've experimented with rollers, just as like the single rollers, and I didn't mind them, but I can shoot accurately with the traditional guns, and I seem to have less problems with them. So I wasn't going to reinvent the wheel. That said, I wouldn't mind. I haven't tried the new big double rollers for large shafts. If I can get a double roller aim right gun to throw an 8mm shaft at pace and accurate, then yeah, for sure I'd switch over to that.
Just so you can get rid of the recoil.
Just so I can get rid of the recoil for the bigger guns, yeah, for sure. And then yeah, apart from that, I've got a Sunto D4F. That's probably one of my handiest pieces of kit. Low volume mask. I use the micro masks by Aqualung. They're a bit of a finicky mask, but they seem to fit me. So silicone weight belt is probably a big recommendation. The weight belt I've got now is the first one I ever owned, and it's still going strong. And then a silicone weight belt I've been using. The one I've got at the moment, it's an Omo one, I think, but I can't really tell what brand it is anymore. I've had it since day dot, and it still looks just as good. So yeah, a good silicone belt's always good compared to the rubber ones. Apart from that, I always carry a light rigging kit and a bit of wasabi and soy in the bag.
Yeah, nice one.
Bit of sashimi on the go.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, now we're headed to Turbo's definite.
This is my favourite section.
Piece of the show.
Couldn't wait to get to it.
He never asks these questions, right? So I'll ask them on his behalf. What is the single best piece of advice you've ever been given for spearfishing, John?
The single best piece of advice is dive with as many people as you can, learn what you can from them, and then pick and choose all the stuff that you enjoy and that works for you. Just make your own hybrid style, and that'll make you the best diver you can be. That's probably one of the early pieces of advice that were given to me, and I've always went by.
Yeah, nice. All right, who has been the most influential person or people in your spearfishing?
Oh, my best mate, Davey Jensen, probably. He was already such a good spearo when we first met, at the age of like 15. So I was always in competition with him, and it'd definitely be because of him that I advanced so quick in my earlier days.
All right. During your 11 years, I believe, spearfishing, what is the single biggest lesson you've learned?
Make sure you're first aid trained. It's definitely saved lives between our whole crew of us all being first aid trained.
It's a good one.
And you gave a couple of cracker stories that sort of really highlight that. If you could describe what the spearfishing experience means to you in one sentence, what would that sentence be?
For me, it's probably it's just as much a part of everyday life these days. Like it's a method of collecting food for the week's meals, the social experience, and a place to clear the head.
Yeah, nice. And I was going to ask you who is the best person to go spearfishing with and why, but you're going to say my girlfriend because she's wonderful. Is that right?
I was going to say my girlfriend, but not that she isn't wonderful. It probably wouldn't be the reason why I like to spearfish with her. She definitely is. But the reason I love spearfishing with her is she just reminds me so much of myself, really. Like, she's just so passionate about the sport. Like, for example, the last trip we went on, we spent a week on Northwest Island camping, and all she wanted to do was shoot a cobia. And on our very last day, I took her out to a spot where we knew there was some rays congregating, and we actually found a cobia on the sand lying, and she got a chance to approach it and went down. The cobia's lifted up off the bottom, and she went to take the shot, and unfortunately, it was a missed shot. And after that, it was just a cranky march back to shore. I was in the background just in tears, rolling in the water the whole way back. We've all had that experience, and it's just hilarious for people who are looking back on the time that they've done it on someone else that's just done it for the first time, I think. So I just love all those moments, seeing stuff happen for the first time with her.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's awesome, man.
And
all right.
And while we're on the subject, a big thank you to your girlfriend, actually, because she was the one that said we should get in touch with you and get you on the show. And so here we are. So, yeah, a big thank you to your partner for organising that for us.
Yeah, awesome. I'm gonna link your Instagram profile up in the show notes, John. Is there anything else you want people to come and have a look at?
Yeah, I'd just like to give a shout out to all the men and women of all the AirSea rescue services, like the Central Queensland RACQ helicopter and Westpac helicopter rescue, RACQ life flight rescue services, all those guys. They mostly run on donations and funding from other sources. They're not. I don't think any of them. I could be wrong here, but I don't think any of them are really government funded. So, any support that can be shown in their direction, they've saved my life, and most people probably will know someone else or a mate that has been saved by them. So they don't get enough credit, those guys.
Awesome. I'll try and link a few of them up in the show notes as well, so people can come and have a look and support them. So that's pretty awesome, John. Cool, wicked. Really, really appreciated getting you on the show. I've wanted to hear the story behind those two fish for a long, long time, and so it was an absolute pleasure chatting with you today.
Yeah, not a problem. It's been good to have a chat with you guys. Always good.
Cool. All right, John. We'll catch you later, buddy.
Thanks, John.
Yes, sir.
If, like me, you have a friend like Shrek who comes over often and often misses the toilet bowl when he's having a leak, get yourself a copy of Spearing Magazine. Not only is it a great read with full glossy photos, it also is a good way to soak up all that wayward spray. So get your copy of spearingmagazine.com. Spearing Magazine from spearingmagazine.com. Okay, that is today's episode with John Pengelly. Big thank you to John for coming on the show. Big thanks to Shrek for making it happen. And a big thank you to you for listening. All right, now our Kickstarter campaign is coming up for 99 tips to get better at spearfishing. If you'd like to support that and help us out with that project, you can do so. Our Facebook page will have all the details pinned at the top, or you can just Google 99 tips to get better at spearfishing Kickstarter, and it will come up for you in there. That's kicking off on the 10th of March. Check it out. It's an awesome book. It will help your spearfishing, guaranteed. All righty. That's it from me. That's it from us for another fortnight. I have no idea who's up next. So it could be anybody. You could possibly get a phone call from me one afternoon and you have to talk to me about spearfishing for 45 minutes to an hour. So just be prepared. But seriously, I've got to pull my finger out and do some work, but I'll make sure that happens. The Noob Spearo podcast isn't going anywhere just yet. Alrighty guys, have a great fortnight. I hope you get out and shoot some fish. Hope you get some nice clear water and calm seas. Until then, don't dive alone and stay safe. Guys, winter is coming, so if you've got holes in your socks, a rip in your wetsuit, do yourself a favour and check out the Adreno Easter sale. March 17 to April 15, savings across the store. And the best thing about it, you probably already heard it, but you can use the Noob Spearo code at checkout. That's Noob Spearo. Put in the little code box at checkout when you're shopping online. You can shop online with Adreno at spearfishing.com.au. Check it out now.